Big developments in the race for the White House this morning. Political science professor at IU South Bend, Jamie Smith, joins us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so the big announcement last night surprised a lot of people. Ted Cruz dropping out should have been the sweet spot for Indiana, but he lost. Why did Ted Cruz lose Indiana?
Well, there are a couple of things to remember. I mean, one is that Donald Trump came into the state on a huge run, right? I mean, he had a big week last week out on the East Coast, and there's some momentum there. Another factor really comes to the narrative that Trump was putting out of saying this is a rigged system, and people, I believe, started responding to that narrative.
So what happens next? Do you think the GOP will now rally behind Donald Trump?
Yes, I think that they are at a moment. You've been seeing that in reports, talking with members of Congress recently. That's their next step, trying to rally around the candidate that looks like he's on the way to the nomination.
But will there be enthusiasm? What do you think the mood will be?
Well, I think there's always been a little bit of resistance, right, from a lot of Republicans who are elected. But building towards the convention, that's what conventions are for, right, to bring the party together, and they will have to begin working on that.
Do you think Ted Cruz or any of the other candidates will come up and say, we now stand behind you, Mr. Trump?
It's pretty soon, right? I mean, we mentioned the speech last night. He didn't come out and say that yet, but when you start thinking about it from a partisan perspective and contrasting Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, who looks to be the nominee at this point, I think you'll start to see the party come together.
A new CNN poll just out this morning shows Donald Trump would lose to Hillary Clinton by double digits. What does he need to do to turn that around?
Well, he needs to really stress the differences in the candidates. I think one thing he's been trying to do lately is talk about policy. Last week he gave a foreign policy speech. I think you'll start to see him pivot to talking more about policy as he feels more comfortable that the nomination is his.
There has been a lot of talk about why Trump got to this point, and that's because he was being Donald Trump. Do you think we're going to see less of what we have seen so far and him trying to be more, quote, presidential?
There were a run of stories last week essentially quoting an aide saying you'll start to see him be more presidential, but he seemed to push back on that and kind of resort to the more similar attacks we've been seeing over the course of the campaign.
Why do you think Bernie Sanders is staying in this race? What does he have to prove? And do you think it will hurt the Democrats the longer he stays in it?
Well, I mean, he keeps winning, right? I mean, Secretary Clinton did have a very good week last week out east, but Sanders before that had strung together a number of victories. He comes to Indiana, has a surprise victory here last night. The polls were close, but most experts were saying that he was not going to win. So I think one reason he's staying in is he's having success.
At the end of the day, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are going head to head. How vitriolic do you think this is going to be?
Well, if it mimics the tone of the primary campaigns that we've seen, it is going to be quite intense, right? And things always get that way. This is not going to be a new phenomenon. If you look back in history, we've always had very heated campaign rhetoric, but this one could set a precedent.
Okay. All right, Jamie Smith, always interesting. Thank you for being here this morning.